disciples unto Jesus, saying, Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus called a little child unto him, and set him in the midst of them, and said,
Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. By ecstatic communion absorbs in his cosmic vibration, saturated consciousness, the divine childlike qualities, humility, purity, love, joy, receives me, that is, gradually attunes himself with and manifests my Christ consciousness that sent the Christ intelligence as its pure reflection and vibratory creation. Truly great masterminds of India that I have seen are divinely childlike, displaying the qualities that are natural to a pure mind. Sincerity, frankness, non-attachment, universality, uniformity of action, thought, speech, forgiveness, truthfulness, calmness, sweetness, laughter, and freedom from worry, minus the child's ignorance. A person who does not cultivate the above-mentioned attributes latent in the soul is constantly beset with selfishness, suspicion, worries, fear, and attachment, which steal away his peace and leave him in misery. As a well-adjusted child lives happily, confidently secure in the protecting power and love of parents, so a divine man with childlike trust relinquishes fear, worldliness, and egotistical living by completely depending on the all-protecting power and divine love of God.
Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. As the United States and its allies in the war on terrorism press the hunt for Osama bin Laden, CBS News has exclusive information tonight about where bin Laden was and what he was doing in the last hours before his followers struck the United States September 11th. This is a result of hard-nosed investigative reporting by a team of CBS News journalists and by one of the best foreign correspondents in the business, CBS's Barry Peterson. Here is Peterson's exclusive report.
Everyone remembers what happened on September 11th. Here's the story of what may have happened the night before. It is a tale as twisted as the hunt for Osama bin Laden. CBS News has been told that the night before the September 11th terrorist attack, Osama bin Laden was in Pakistan. He was getting medical treatment with the support of the very military that days later pledged its backing for the U.S. war on terror in Afghanistan. Pakistan intelligence sources tell CBS News that bin Laden was spirited into this military hospital in Rawalpindi for kidney dialysis treatment. On that night, says this medical worker who wanted her identity protected, they moved out all the regular staff in the urology department and sent in a secret team to replace them. She says it was treatment for a very special person. The special team was obviously up to no good. The military had him surrounded, says this hospital employee who also wanted his identity masked. And I saw the mysterious patient helped out of a car. Since that time, he says, I have seen many pictures of the man. He is the man we know as Osama bin Laden. I also heard two army officers talking to each other. They were saying that Osama bin Laden had to be watched carefully and looked after.
A glaring anomaly is the fact that Pakistani officials said there was neither internet or telephone connection to the home where the family and seemingly others resided, but it was cited as a command and control center by the U.S. administration, who had also stated that the residents did not use mobile phones either, for fear of their location being discovered. There was also apparently no electricity, the world was initially told, but gleefully, apparently, they took away a treasure trove of computers and mobile phones. We have the videos of bin Laden's sad, deteriorating years, wrapped up in a blanket, topped by a woolly hat, unkempt beard, sadly replaying himself appearing on television. There he sits, on the floor, in an apparently run-down dwelling, zapping away at the remote. No electricity, remember? The zapping on the remote is being done, and it is held in his right hand. Osama bin Laden was left-handed. This from the FBI Most Wanted notice. Bin Laden is left-handed and walks with a cane. But what makes this case absurd is that in September 2011, a few months before the judgment, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who has questioned the official 9/11 narrative, was accused by al-Qaeda leaders of spreading conspiracy theories about the 9/11 attack. The semi-official media outlet of al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula insisted that al-Qaeda had been behind the attacks and criticized the Iranian president for discrediting the terrorist group. Havlish versus Iran reads like a typical kangaroo court case. Iran's responsibility for 9/11 is mostly based on previous attacks and foiled attempts in the US and other countries, and all the so-called evidence is actually a collection of assumptions which are turned into facts from one sentence to another without any addition of factual evidence to support it. Some claims are inconsistent, purely subjective, and what is said to be the strongest evidence is a clumsy distortion of facts, which can be easily refuted by sound factual evidence. First published in 2001, The Justification for Waging War. The Bush administration has stated that it has proof that Osama bin Laden is behind the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. In the words of British Prime Minister Tony Blair, "I have seen absolutely powerful and incontrovertible evidence of his link to the events of the 11th of September." What Tony Blair fails to mention is that agencies of the US government, including the CIA, continue to harbor Osama bin Laden's al-Qaeda. A major war supposedly against international terrorism has been launched by a government which is harboring international terrorism as part of its foreign policy agenda. In other words, the main justification for waging war has been totally fabricated. The American people have been deliberately and consciously misled by their government into supporting a major military adventure which affects our collective future. This decision to mislead the American people was taken barely a few hours after the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center. Without supporting evidence, Osama had already been tagged as the prime suspect. 2 days later, on Thursday the 13th of September, while the FBI investigations had barely commenced, President Bush pledged to lead the world to victory. The administration confirmed its intention to embark on a sustained military campaign rather than a single dramatic action directed against Osama bin Laden. In addition to Afghanistan, a number of countries in the Middle East were mentioned as possible targets, including Iraq, Iran, Libya, and the Sudan, and several prominent U.S. political figures and media pundits have demanded that the airstrikes be extended to other countries which harbor international terrorism. According to intelligence sources, Osama bin Laden's al-Qaeda has operations in some 50 to 60 countries, providing ample pretext to intervene in several rogue states in the Middle East and Central Asia. Moreover, the entire U.S. legislature, with only one honest and courageous dissenting voice in the House of Representatives, has tacitly endorsed the administration's decision to go to war. Members of the House and the Senate have access through the various committees to official confidential reports and intelligence documents, which prove beyond doubt that agencies of the U.S. government have ties to international terrorism. They cannot say we did not know. In fact, most of this evidence is in the public domain.
I have already said that I am not involved in the 11 September attacks in the United States. As a Muslim, I try my best to avoid telling a lie. I had no knowledge of these attacks, nor do I consider the killing of innocent women, children, and other humans as an appreciable act. Islam strictly forbids causing harm to innocent women, children, and other people. Such a practice is forbidden ever in the course of a battle. It is the United States which is perpetrating every maltreatment on women, children, and common people of other faiths, particularly the followers of Islam. They needed an enemy, so they first started propaganda against Osama and Taliban, and then this incident happened. You see, the Bush administration approved a budget of $40 billion. Where will this huge amount go? It will be provided to the same agencies which need huge funds and want to exert their importance. Now they will spend the money for their expansion and for increasing their importance. I will give you an example. Drug smugglers from all over the world are in contact with the U.S. secret agency. These agencies do not want to eradicate narcotics cultivation and trafficking because their importance will be diminished. The people in the U.S. Drug Enforcement Department are encouraging drug trade so that they could show performance to get billions of dollars worth of budget.
The Inspector General for the U.S. Department of Defense reports that the military heavily drugged some detainees in a way which impaired their ability to provide accurate information. Detainees in custody of the U.S. military were interrogated while drugged with powerful antipsychotic and other medications that could impair an individual's ability to provide accurate information, according to a declassified Department of Defense Inspectors General's report. Over the past decade, dozens of current and former detainees and their civilian and military attorneys have alleged in news reports and in court documents that prisoners held by the U.S. government in Guantanamo, Iraq, and Afghanistan were forcibly injected with unknown medications and pills during or immediately prior to marathon interrogation sessions in an attempt to compel them to confess to terrorist-related crimes of which they were accused. I wrote last month, one of the two senior instructors from the Air Force team which taught U.S. servicemen how to resist torture by foreign governments when used to extract false confessions has blown the whistle on the true purpose behind the U.S. torture program. Truthout reported yesterday, Jessen's notes were provided to Truthout by retired Air Force Captain Michael Kearns, a master seer instructor and decorated veteran who has previously held high-ranking positions within the Air Force headquarters staff and the Department of Defense. Kearns and his boss, Robert Aldrich, the head of the Air Force Intelligence Special Survival Training Program, SSTP, based out of Fairchild Air Force Base in Spokane, Washington, hired Jessen in May 1989. Kearns, who was head of operations at SSTP and trained thousands of service members, said Jessen was brought into the program due to an increase in the number of new SEER courses being taught and the fact that it required psychological expertise on hand in a full-time basis. Jessen, then the chief of psychology services at the U.S. Air Force Survival School, immediately started to work directly with Kearns on a new course for Special Mission Units, SMUs, which had as its goal individual resistance to terrorist exploitation. The course, known as SV-91, was developed for the Survival Evasion Resistance Escape, SERE, branch of the U.S. Air Force Intelligence Agency, which acted as the Executive Agent Action Office for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Jessen's notes form the basis for one part of SV-91, psychological aspects of detention. Kearns was one of only two officers within the DoD qualified to teach all three SEER-related courses within SSTP on a worldwide basis, according to a copy of a 1989 letter written Aldrich, who nominated him Officer of the Year. The Jensen notes clearly state the totality of what was being reverse engineered, not just enhanced interrogation technique, but an entire program of exploitation of prisoners, using torture as a central pillar, he said. What I think is important to note as an ex-SEER resistance to interrogation instructor is the focus of Jessen's instruction. It is exploitation, not specifically interrogation. And this is not a picayune issue, because if one were to reverse engineer a course on resistance to exploitation, then what one would get is a plan to exploit prisoners, not interrogate them. The CIA-DoD torture program appears to have the same goals as the terrorist organizations or enemy governments for which SV-91 and other SEER courses were created to defend against. The full exploitation of the prisoner in his intelligence, propaganda, or other needs held by the detaining power, such as the recruitment of informers and double agents. Those aspects of the U.S. detainee program have not generally been discussed as part of the torture story in the American press. Jessen wrote that cooperation is the end goal of the detainer, who wants the detainee to see that he, the detainer, has total control of you because you are completely dependent on him, and thus you must comply with his wishes. Therefore, it is absolutely inevitable that you must cooperate with him in some way. Propaganda, special favors, confession, etc. Kearns said, based on what he has read in declassified government documents and news reports about the role SEER played in the Bush administration's torture program, Jessen clearly reverse engineered his lesson plan and used resistance methods to abuse war on terror detainees. So we have the two main Air Force insiders concerning the genesis of the torture program confirming with original notes that the whole purpose of the torture program was to extract false confessions. Published October 20th, 2001. Although uniformly ignored by the mainstream U.S. media, there is abundant and clear evidence that a number of transactions in financial markets indicate specific criminal foreknowledge of the September 11th attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. That evidence also demonstrates that, in the case of at least one of these trades, which has left a $2.5 million prize unclaimed, the firm used to place the put options on the United Airlines stock was, until 1998, managed by the man who is now in the number 3 executive director position at the Central Intelligence Agency. Until 1997, A.B. Buzzy Krongard had been chairman of the investment bank A.B. Brown. A.B. Brown was acquired by Bankers Trust in 1997. Krongard then became, as part of the merger, vice chairman of Bankers Trust / A.B. Brown, one of the 20 major U.S. banks named by Senator Carl Levine this year as being connected to money laundering. Krongard's last position at Bankers Trust was to oversee private client relations. In this capacity, he had direct hands-on relations with some of the wealthiest people in the world in a kind of specialized banking operation that has been identified by the U.S. Senate and other investigators as being closely connected to the laundering of drug money. Bankers Trust was acquired by Deutsche Bank in 1999. The combined firm is the single largest bank in Europe, and as we shall see, Deutsche Bank played several key roles in events connected to the September 11 attack. A September 21st story by the Israeli Herzliya International Policy Institute for Counterterrorism entitled Black Tuesday, the world's largest trading scam, documented the following trades connected to the September 11th attack. Between September 6th and 7th, the Chicago Board Options Exchange saw purchases of 4,744 put options on United Airlines, but only 396 call options. Assuming that 4,000 of the options were bought by people with advanced knowledge of the imminent attack, these insiders would have profited by almost $5 million. On September 10th, 4,516 put options on American Airlines were bought on the Chicago Exchange, compared to only 748 calls. Again, there was no news at that point to justify this imbalance. Again, assuming that 4,000 of these options trades represent insiders, they would represent a gain of about $4 million. Morgan Stanley Dean Witter and Company, which occupied 22 floors of the World Trade Center, saw 2,157 of its October $45 put options bought in the 3 trading days before Black Tuesday. This compares to an average of 27 contracts per day before September 6th. Morgan Stanley's share price fell from $48.90 to $42.50 in the aftermath of the attacks. Assuming that 2,000 of these options contracts were bought based upon knowledge of the approaching attacks, the purchasers could have profited by at least $1.2 million. Merrill Lynch and Company, which occupied 22 floors of the World Trade Center, sold 12,215 October $45 put options bought in the 4 trading days before the attacks. The previous average volume in these shares had been about 252 contracts per day, a 1,200% increase. When trading resumed, Merrill's shares fell from $46.88 to $41.50. Assuming that 11,000 option contracts were bought by insiders, their profit would have been about $5.5 million. On September 29, 2001, in a vital story that has gone unnoticed by the major media, the San Francisco Chronicle reported, investors have yet to collect more than $2.5 million in profits they made trading options in the stock of United Airlines before the September 11th terrorist attacks, according to a source familiar with the trades and market data. On October 17, 2000, 11 months before 9/11, Blackstone Real Estate Advisors of the Blackstone Group LP purchased from Teachers Insurance and Annuity Association the participating mortgage secured by World Trade Center Building 7. April 26, 2001, the Port Authority leased the World Trade Center for 99 years to Silverstein Properties and Westfield America, Inc. The transaction was authorized by Port Authority Chairman Louis M. Eisenberg. This transfer from the New York and New Jersey Port Authority was tantamount to the privatization of the World Trade Center complex. The official press release described it as the richest real estate prize in New York City history. The retail space underneath the complex was leased to Westfield America, Inc. On 24 July 2001, 6 weeks prior to 9/11, Silverstein took control of the lease of the World Trade Center following the Port Authority decision on April 26. Silverstein and Frank Lowery, CEO of Westfield, Inc., took control of the 10.6 million square foot World Trade Center complex. Lowery leased the shopping center called the Mall at the World Trade Center, which comprised about 427,000 square feet of retail space. Explicitly included in the agreement was that Silverstein and Westfield were given the right to rebuild the structures if they were destroyed. In the transaction, Silverstein signed a rental contract for the World Trade Center over 99 years, amounting to $3.2 billion in installments to be made to the Port Authority. $800 million covered fees, including a down payment of the order of $100 million. Of this amount, Silverstein put in $14 million of his own money. The annual payment on the lease was of the order of $115 million.
Next thing you know, we've got the designs of a building. And the first design meeting was in April of 2000. And construction began shortly thereafter in 2002. And we went to finance the building with Liberty bonds, construction bonds from the Liberty Bond program that was initiated by the federal government to enable us to rebuild the Trade Center. But it still required insurance company bonds, insurance company payments under the policies. And so, next thing you know, this building was under full construction.